The terminal at Seattle-Tacoma International hummed with early morning life. Travelers shuffled by, dragging rolling suitcases and tapping impatiently on phones, while the smell of stale coffee mingled with the faint metallic scent of jet fuel wafting from the nearby gates. Among them, a woman walked quietly, almost invisible. Her jeans were faded, her sweater plain, her brown hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. She carried a soft leather backpack, worn at the seams, and a single carry-on that bore a small, nearly imperceptible patch, a faded emblem of an eagle gripping lightning bolts. Most people wouldn't notice it, and that was precisely the point. She approached Gate 14, her stride steady but measured. Security lines moved faster than she expected, and she slid through without incident, passing beneath the scanners with a calm that betrayed nothing. No one glanced twice at her boarding pass. No one whispered guesses about her destination, her purpose, or her past. To the casual observer, she was just another passenger, a quiet woman boarding a routine flight to Denver. Yet beneath that calm exterior, her mind was far from settled. She had flown hundreds of times before, but today's flight carried a tension that she couldn't quite shake. She glanced around the gate area, eyes scanning, assessing. Nobody she recognized. Good. That was exactly what she wanted. Her life in the civilian world had been simple, almost invisible, but the slightest slip could change everything. She had a reputation she didn't intend to broadcast. A reputation that, if discovered, would make every other passenger's safety dependent on her choices in the coming hours. As she walked down the jet bridge, she could feel the familiar pulse of adrenaline that used to accompany her missions, though it had dulled over the years. She didn't let it show. She smiled politely at the flight attendant greeting passengers at the entrance, her calm demeanor masking decades of training and experience. The young woman behind the counter nodded briefly, unaware that the person in front of her had once commanded F-16s in hostile airspace, orchestrated precision operations, and survived circumstances that most people couldn't even imagine. "Enjoy your flight," the attendant said. She nodded, boarding with a subtle confidence, slipping into seat 14A by the window. She chose the aisle sometimes, the middle on other flights, but today it was the window, a vantage point that offered both perspective and concealment. Once seated, she stowed her carry-on overhead with practiced ease and sank into her seat, letting out a soft breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Around her, passengers were chatting, scrolling on phones, adjusting children in car seats. The flight attendant moved down the aisle with the precision of a metronome, checking safety cards, reminding everyone to fasten their seatbelts. She smiled politely when the attendant paused in front of her, nodding in acknowledgement. No one guessed that this woman had once been part of an elite aerial team, commanding missions that were classified even from most of the military hierarchy. As the engines roared to life, a subtle vibration thrummed beneath her seat. She placed her hand lightly on the armrest, feeling the hum resonate through her body. The aircraft began its slow pushback from the gate, tires squealing faintly against the tarmac. Outside, the terminal receded, replaced by the sprawling expanse of the runway. Her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the morning sun painted the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. She had always loved flying, not for leisure, but for the clarity it provided, the sense that in the sky, nothing could touch you except the mission, except the unseen threats. 30 minutes into the flight, she sipped the coffee she had requested, the rich aroma grounding her in the mundane rhythm of the cabin. Around her, people were immersed in movies, newspapers, or whispered conversations. But she wasn't here for leisure. Her eyes scanned the instrumentation panel embedded subtly in the back of her tray table, a miniature device she kept for personal reasons, not official purposes. It flickered faintly, indicating an anomaly she hadn't expected. A slight signal on the radar, too faint for the flight crew to notice, yet undeniable to her trained eye. She frowned, tracing the origin of the signal mentally, analyzing its trajectory, altitude, and speed. This wasn't a passenger emergency, a technical glitch, or a routine air traffic correction. This was someone or something approaching. Her stomach tightened slightly, a flash of instinct she hadn't felt in years. She glanced around, eyes flicking over the cabin. No one would understand if she acted. No one could. It had been too long since the world knew who she really was. And yet somewhere, someone had already noticed. In the cockpit, far beyond her line of sight, instruments began to flicker as the autopilot system registered the anomaly. The captain frowned, leaning closer to his co-pilot, murmuring technical jargon that meant nothing to the passengers but screamed concern in every inflection. Flight attendants continued their rounds, oblivious, smiling as they passed drinks to unsuspecting travelers. The hum of conversation continued around her like white noise, but in her ears, the signal from the radar whispered like a countdown. She adjusted her seat, careful not to disturb the person next to her, a man with earbuds tucked firmly in. And then it happened. A soft vibration, not from the engines this time, but through the entire fuselage like a subtle pulse. The passengers barely noticed it, some shifting uneasily in their seats. But for her, every nerve went on alert. She recognized the rhythm immediately. Years of experience told her this was not normal turbulence. She could feel the precision of whatever was nearby, calculating, moving, assessing. She sipped the last of her coffee, setting the cup down gently, her eyes narrowing. She whispered under her breath, almost inaudibly, "They've found me." A sudden calm settled over her as she prepared mentally for what was coming. This flight was no longer just a routine trip from Seattle to Denver. Something, or someone, had taken an interest in her presence, and they weren't sending a polite invitation. The engines roared louder as the aircraft climbed into the clouds, sunlight slicing through the windows, glinting off the tiny metal details of her patch. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, serene and beautiful, but she knew it was deceptive. Above and around her, unseen forces were already moving into position. The cabin crew moved past her again, unaware of the storm brewing in the airspace just beyond the fuselage. Passengers smiled, adjusted headphones, read newspapers, and napped. And then the faintest signal pinged again on her device. Not from her own technology, not from any commercial system, from something far more advanced, far more dangerous. She leaned back, eyes scanning the horizon through the window. The clouds shimmered with an eerie light. Her pulse quickened, though she didn't show it. Somewhere above the Pacific Northwest, in the endless expanse of sky, two aircraft peeled off from the clouds, precision-trained pilots scanning for their target. And their target was unmistakable. In the cabin, no one suspected a thing. But in seat 14A, a retired pilot, a former military tactician, a woman who had once commanded deadly air missions, felt the first tingle of recognition. Her call sign, a name she had buried with memories of danger and sacrifice, was about to resurface. And she knew that when it did, nothing would ever be ordinary again. The engines hummed, passengers chatted, coffee cups clinked. Yet a shadow moved over the aircraft, a shadow she could feel in her bones. Somewhere very near, the world she had left behind had found her, and it was coming fast. The cabin hummed with the normal morning routine, oblivious to the anomaly unfolding in the skies above. Flight attendants moved down the aisles with practiced ease, refilling coffee cups, answering polite questions about connecting flights, and reminding passengers to keep their seat belts fastened. Phones buzzed, children cried softly, the murmur of conversation filling the cabin like static electricity. But in the cockpit, calm was impossible. Captain Thomas Reynolds leaned over the controls, scanning the digital readouts. The autopilot displayed a minor fluctuation, an unusual, almost imperceptible blip on the radar. At first he dismissed it, thinking it a glitch, a common artifact of high-altitude instrumentation. But then the blip moved. It wasn't random, it had direction, intent, and it was gaining altitude, faster than any commercial aircraft could manage. "Co-pilot," Reynolds said, voice clipped, "do you see that? It's climbing too quickly. That's not normal traffic." Lieutenant Jackson traced the blip on his console. "You're right, Captain. Looks like, I don't know, a military-grade aircraft. The signal is clean, high frequency, too fast for commercial radar, too precise for anything else." In seat 14A, the woman, retired Air Force pilot, tactical operations expert, felt her pulse spike. Her fingers brushed against the worn leather of her carry-on over the faded emblem. The pattern on her device confirmed what her instincts had already whispered. Someone was watching and someone knew who she was. She didn't flinch, didn't react openly, but her mind raced. Every muscle memory, every training drill she had honed over a decade surfaced instantly. The captain tried recalibrating instruments, cross-checking with flight control. Seattle Center, this is Flight 614. We're reading an unknown signal near our altitude, bearing 47, requesting confirmation. Static answered him. Then a voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the white noise. Commercial 614, you are on an unapproved trajectory. Identify secondary occupant. Call sign, Eagle 1. Reynolds froze, hands gripping the controls. Did you hear that? Jackson paled. Call sign, Eagle 1. That can't be right, that's restricted. Only a top-tier squadron uses that designation. The woman in seat 14A closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, breathing slowly, a practiced calm masking the surge of adrenaline inside. She had trained for situations like this, though she'd hoped never to see them again. Every alert in the system, every procedural warning, every flicker of anomalous energy on the radar was screaming the same thing. She wasn't alone, and the people approaching were not ordinary. Passengers remained unaware. Phones were still out, earbuds snug in ears, and children continued to whimper softly. But tension began to build in the cabin almost imperceptibly, like the tightening of a rope. The hum of conversation seemed distant, as if reality itself had shifted. The seatbelt signs flickered once, twice. Flight attendants glanced at the cockpit door, exchanging nervous smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The first tremor came, a subtle vibration through the fuselage, so light that most didn't notice, but she felt it instantly. The rhythm, the precision, the force, it was familiar. Her mind raced. Two possibilities. One, a sophisticated simulation of turbulence. Two, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And there was no mistake. This was deliberate. Captain Reynolds adjusted the altitude slightly, trying to test the signal, isolate it. But as he did, the plane responded unexpectedly, a subtle shift in pressure beneath the wings. The anomaly moved in perfect synchronization, mirroring the aircraft's path, almost as if anticipating every decision. His knuckles whitened on the yoke. "Jackson," he said, voice low, "we need to alert Defense Command, now." "Already trying," the co-pilot said. His hands danced over the console. "Negative, all channels static. Only one frequency is open and it's encrypted, military encrypted." The woman inhaled sharply, her eyes now scanning the aisle without making it obvious. She didn't want to draw attention. Every passenger could remain blissfully ignorant, or become collateral in an incident that might not be survivable. She remembered the drills, the extraction scenarios, the impossible odds she'd faced. Her entire life, every decision she'd made had led to this moment, and yet her stomach twisted with unease. The vibration returned stronger and the cabin subtly tilted. Phones buzzed as alarms went off in the cockpit, faint yet insistent. Over the radio, the authoritative voice came again. "Eagle 1, confirm identity immediately. This is Air Combat Command. Respond." The captain's forehead creased. "This isn't standard protocol. We've never had an intercept request like this on a civilian flight." The woman exhaled slowly, a single bead of sweat tracing her temple. She had trained herself to react without thinking, to anticipate without hesitation. A lifetime of split-second decisions in life-or-death scenarios had conditioned her body for this precise moment. Yet the gravity of revealing herself, of answering that call sign, weighed on her. It could mean exposure. It could mean death. She leaned back, hands resting calmly on her knees, speaking just above a whisper. "They know I'm here," she muttered to herself. The patch on her bag, the call sign, the emblem, all of it meant nothing to anyone else in this cabin, but to those pilots above, it meant everything. Outside the aircraft, The clouds parted slightly, sunlight glinting on the metal of two distant silhouettes cutting through the sky with uncanny precision. F-22 Raptors, almost ghost-like, advanced at alarming speed, engines humming with lethal intent. Their pilots scanned the instruments, communicating only in clipped, coded bursts. And then the moment came. They locked visual on the aircraft, formation perfect, wings slicing the sky, shadows falling briefly across the cabin windows. Passengers shifted, murmured, some peering outside, wondering why the sky seemed alive. The woman in 14A didn't flinch. She recognized the formation immediately. She knew the pilots, knew their flying style, and more importantly, knew what it meant that they had recognized her. Her call sign, Eagle One. The captain's voice cut through the cabin PA, strained and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a technical observation. Please remain seated. Crew is handling the situation." No one moved, though whispers began, the tension palpable. Phones were raised to the windows, cameras out, but the woman barely noticed. Her mind raced, weighing probabilities, calculating risks, remembering scenarios she had faced in the deserts of Iraq, the skis over unknown territories, classified operations that had left her alone, isolated, and at times hunted. And then, as the aircraft adjusted its course slightly to avoid a cloud pocket, she felt it, a surge of recognition, a sudden certainty. The pilots weren't just intercepting the flight. They were looking for her. They knew exactly who she was. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't been sought out in years, had avoided all contact, had erased herself from records. Yet here they were, two aircraft cutting through the clouds, precision perfect, closing fast. Somewhere in the cockpit, the captain adjusted controls again, unaware that the woman beside him was more experienced in tactical maneuvers than he could ever imagine. She breathed steadily, masking her excitement, her fear, her anticipation. The entire cabin remained oblivious. Outside, the sun glinted off the fighters' fuselages, a warning reflected in polished metal. Her fingers brushed the edge of her seat, gripping lightly. The signal was not random. The pursuit was not coincidence. And the call sign meant they recognized her. She whispered under her breath, almost silently, "It's happening." And somewhere above the clouds, two F-22s adjusted their formation, zeroing in. Their pilots spoke only in code now, voice tense, clipped but familiar to her trained ears. Eagle One had been found. And whatever came next, the cabin was about to become the most dangerous place on Earth. The cabin hummed with oblivion. Passengers adjusted headphones, read newspapers, scrolled through phones, and whispered about breakfast plans or connecting flights. The subtle tension in the air, imperceptible to all but one, was nothing they could recognize. Yet the aircraft shuddered almost imperceptibly, a barely noticeable vibration rippling through the seats. To the average traveler, it might have been a passing cloud or minor turbulence. But to her, it was unmistakable precision. She leaned slightly forward in her window seat, eyes scanning the horizon, tracing the sun-glinting clouds, the faint streaks in the distance. There, slicing through the morning sky with a grace that made her chest tighten, were two F-22 Raptors. Their engines didn't roar, they sang, a controlled, terrifying hum that reverberated in her chest. Formation perfect, wings angled in deadly precision. One on the left, one on the right. They weren't just intercepting. They were executing a standard lock-on maneuver, something she had taught dozens of pilots to recognize. The passengers noticed too late. Phones whipped out, murmurs escalated to audible gasps. Windows fogged with hands pressed against glass. Children pointed and squealed. Some passengers assumed a military drill, others feared an attack. Cabin crew moved toward the front, faces pale. "Remain seated," someone called, but even that sounded hollow against the reality outside. The woman in 14A, calm in demeanor but hyper-aware in every sense, took a deep breath. She recognized the formation instantly. The wingmen's angle, the speed, they weren't random pilots, they were precision-trained elite. And the call sign, yes, she whispered it under her breath again, almost as a prayer, "Eagle One." The words felt foreign on her tongue, yet familiar, heavy with the weight of past missions, past losses, and decades of secrecy. The cockpit instruments flickered. Captain Reynolds squinted, leaning closer to the digital readouts. "Jackson, do you see that? 2 military aircraft and they're mirroring us." Jackson's face drained of color. "Mirroring? That's not standard intercept protocol for civilian aircraft. They're precise, too precise. And Captain, the call sign they're requesting, it's classified, Eagle 1. The woman's lips tightened. She didn't flinch, didn't make a move that might betray her knowledge to the passengers. Instead, she sat still, fingers resting on the worn leather of her backpack strap. Memories resurfaced. Night sorties over foreign airspace, ejections over hostile terrain, decisions that had meant life or death for dozens of people under her command. She had disappeared after a mission gone wrong, gone quiet, erased from most official records, but they had found her anyway. One of the Raptors broke formation briefly, then returned almost theatrically, wings slicing the sky. The other stayed perfectly aligned, scanning, tracking. Their presence was overwhelming. The woman could almost feel their gaze, trained eyes seeking a familiar pattern, a signature, a response only she could give. Captain Reynolds finally reached for the radio. "Seattle Center, this is Flight 614. We are seeing." Static, then crisp, direct, chilling. "Commercial 614, secondary occupant must identify immediately. Call sign, Eagle 1. The words hung in the air like a guillotine suspended over the cabin. Flight attendants glanced at each other, unsure what to do. Passengers, murmurs turned into whispers, some recording the event on their phones, unaware that the drama unfolding above the clouds was beyond their comprehension. The woman in 14A remained calm externally, but inside, adrenaline sharpened every sense. Her training told her exactly how to handle this. Years of cockpit simulations, evasive maneuvers, threat assessments, they all clicked into place. She didn't panic, she didn't hesitate, but she did recognize the subtle tension building in the pilots outside the fuselage. They knew her. They had recognized her call sign, and that meant one thing: she was no longer invisible. Her eyes briefly scanned the cabin. Nobody had noticed her subtle change in posture, the way her fingers flexed slightly. Nobody could guess that she had once orchestrated air missions with the precision these F-22 pilots now mirrored. She had survived impossible situations, crashes, combat extractions, missions deemed too dangerous for most elite personnel. But this was different. She was surrounded by civilians, a commercial aircraft, no weapons, no backup, and 2 of the deadliest fighters in the world now tailing her every move. Captain Reynolds' voice cracked slightly over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are being approached by military aircraft. Please remain seated. Crew is handling the situation." A young mother clutched her child closer. A businessman pressed his forehead to the window, pale. The murmurs grew, anxiety infecting the cabin. Yet the woman in 14A remained calm, eyes locked on the horizon, calculating her next move. The lead Raptor edged closer, tilting slightly, revealing the pilot inside. She recognized the stance, the helmet style, the posture. Her breath caught. The man in the cockpit wasn't just a pilot. He was part of a squadron she had once led. Her old squadron. She had trained him. She had flown alongside him in missions that were never recorded in any public record. And now he was looking for her. The second Raptor mirrored perfectly, wings cutting the sky, engines humming a precise rhythm. Their formation was no accident. It was tactical perfection, reconnaissance and positioning combined. They were professionals and they knew their target. Their target was her. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She hadn't been found in years, hadn't expected to be found today, thousands of feet above the Pacific Northwest on a routine commercial flight. And yet, here they were, shadowing her with lethal precision. The cockpit door opened slightly. A flight attendant glanced nervously at her. "Ma'am, are you military?" She shook her head faintly, giving a polite, reassuring smile, careful not to reveal anything. "No," she said softly, "just experienced traveler." It was true partially. Experience traveled deeper than most could imagine, and the pilots above knew it. Outside, the lead Raptor adjusted its altitude, tilting slightly. Sunlight glinted off the metal, catching her eye. A flash of recognition surged through her chest. She had trained for this scenario. She had rehearsed every possible interception maneuver, but never in a commercial aircraft, never with innocent civilians around her. She whispered again under her breath, just barely audible, "Eagle 1 reporting." The words felt alien on her tongue, heavy with history, with loss, with decades of buried secrets, and instantly she felt the shift. The F-22 formation adjusted. Their tempo changed. The pursuit wasn't just interception, it was recognition, respect, a dangerous acknowledgement. Passengers remained blissfully unaware of the magnitude. They saw shadows, flashes of metallic wings, perhaps even wondered if this was a military drill or a demonstration. But the woman knew the truth. She had been found, and the sky above was no longer safe. The lead Raptor came closer still, the pilot's eyes briefly locking on her window. Recognition sparked across her mind like lightning. It was him, the man who had flown beside her in missions that had ended in fire, smoke, and silence. And he had the same thought she did. Eagle 1 was alive. And somewhere in the cockpit, Captain Reynolds' voice trembled as he realized that this wasn't just a military escort. It was an identification of the passenger who, until that moment, everyone assumed was anonymous, ordinary, and safe. The tension was unbearable. And yet, the flight continued, cruising at 35,000 feet, ordinary to those inside, extraordinary to those who knew the truth. The hum of the cabin felt distant now, almost dreamlike compared to the intensity building outside and inside her mind. Passengers remained unaware, their faces pressed to the windows, their phones raised, recording fleeting glimpses of the two F-22s that cut through the morning sky with surgical precision. Some murmured questions to flight attendants, but none could comprehend the reality. The aircraft was no longer just a commercial flight. It had become a stage for a high-stakes encounter, invisible to the ordinary eyes surrounding her. She shifted slightly in her seat, careful not to disturb the man on her left, who continued scrolling his phone. Her pulse was steady outwardly, but every neuron in her body was screaming. Years of experience told her that what was happening now was far beyond standard protocol. The lead Raptor's pilot was scanning, calculating, waiting for confirmation, for recognition, for her to respond in a way that only she could. The cockpit crackled with a static-laden voice. Commercial 614, secondary occupant, respond immediately. Call sign, Eagle 1. The words cut like a blade through the cabin's calm. Captain Reynolds stiffened. Secondary occupant, he repeated, voice trembling. Who are they asking for? The flight attendant, moving quickly down the aisle, reached the manifest. She glanced at the list, then back at the cockpit door, her brow furrowed. There's no military passenger listed, just standard civilians. Wait, except, her voice faltered. She noticed the woman in 14A, hesitation hung in the air. Ma'am, the radio is asking for someone. A call sign, Eagle 1. A hush fell over the aisle as she slowly turned toward the flight attendant. The words she'd whispered to herself over and over during training and retirement escaped finally, carefully measured. They're asking for me. The attendant's eyes widened, a flicker of fear mixed with confusion crossing her face. Are you military? She asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. I am, she said softly, voice steady. Former, but right now you don't need to know anything else. Captain Reynolds, gripping the yoke tighter than ever, glanced toward the cabin. Ma'am, if you're involved, this is serious. I need to know what to do. These jets aren't just any intercepts. They are elite. Her gaze shifted to the cockpit doorway and then back to the window. The Raptor formation remained unchanged, deadly in its precision. The pilots had already recognized the signature, the pattern of experience, the calculated calm that only she could produce. And now it was up to her to confirm it, to answer to a world she had long left behind. She rose slowly, deliberately, every motion measured to prevent alarm among the passengers. Her backpack remained slung over her shoulder, her posture calm, almost casual, but every sense was alert. She approached the cockpit, where the pilot's eyes on the radar mirrored the tension she felt. Captain Reynolds stared at her, pale, unsure whether to object or comply. She spoke into the open cockpit door, her voice steady but carrying the weight of decades of secret missions. Eagle One responding. The cabin seemed to hold its collective breath, even though no one could fully understand the magnitude of her words. Outside, the Raptor formation adjusted subtly, the lead jet tilting slightly as if in acknowledgement. In an instant, the pilot's body language shifted. They were no longer simply intercepting. They were reacting to someone they knew, someone they had trusted and lost years ago. A crackle of communication followed over encrypted channels. Eagle One, we thought you were lost. Mission debrief incomplete. Status unknown. Confirmation required. Her lips tightened as she processed the message. Confirmation, yes, she was alive. But the implications were immense. If they had believed her gone, someone else might have assumed her identity, someone could be operating under her credentials. Her eyes narrowed. That thought alone was chilling. Captain Reynolds asked cautiously, "Ma'am, who are they? What does that mean?" She hesitated. "It means they know me. They know what I can do, and they assumed I was dead." A passenger shifted in his seat. Excuse me, is everything okay?" She smiled faintly but didn't answer. Her mind was elsewhere, racing through years of classified operations, mission protocols, and the ghosts of colleagues lost in battle. She could feel the precision of the pilots outside, the meticulous alignment of their flight paths, the subtle adjustments, the recognition embedded in their movements. This was not a routine intercept. This was a reunion, a reckoning. The cockpit crackled again. Eagle One, secondary aircraft requesting visual. Prepare for confirmation check. She swallowed. Years ago she would have smiled at this, a test of skill, speed, and mental acuity. Now she felt the weight of ordinary passengers' lives around her, the fragility of a civilian plane under the gaze of elite fighters. She took a deep breath, centering herself. She moved closer to the cockpit console. "Acknowledged," she said, tone calm, deliberate. Eagle One confirmed, requesting further instructions. Outside, the lead Raptor mirrored a sharp banking motion, a subtle salute in flight formation, almost imperceptible, but she noticed. The second Raptor maintained perfect symmetry, a shadow locked to the civilian aircraft. Their communication tone shifted slightly, less urgent, more calculated, as though the pilots had confirmed her identity. Captain Reynolds finally exhaled. I don't even know what to say," he muttered, eyes wide as he stared at her. "You're this, all of this." She turned, locking eyes briefly with him. "Just keep the plane steady," she said softly, "and keep everyone calm. That's all you need to do right now." The flight attendants, watching from the aisle, glanced at each other. Something had changed. She had not revealed everything, but her presence, her demeanor, carried authority that even civilians could sense. A subtle shift occurred in the cabin. The passengers, still unaware of the specific danger, felt it anyway. A tension that wasn't turbulence, a weight that wasn't gravity. The encrypted comms continued. Eagle One, verify mission status. Secondary aircraft to escort until further instructions. She exhaled slowly, glancing out the window. The Raptor formation had adjusted again, moving into perfect intercept positions. She had survived deadly skis, evasive maneuvers in hostile territories, and classified missions that ended in chaos. But this was different. She had no immediate escape. She was surrounded by civilians, confined to a narrow metal tube, and her past had found her. Her gaze swept over the passengers once more, lingering on the young mother clutching her child, the man asleep with headphones in, the teenagers scrolling, oblivious to the lethal precision in the sky outside. She had to protect them. Her own life, long hidden, was irrelevant. But the people around her, They depended on her now more than anyone could imagine. And somewhere above, two F-22s adjusted course, precision engineered to maintain visual, tracking every subtle movement. The lead pilot's eyes, barely visible through the visor, communicated without words: recognition, respect, a shared history of survival. Her throat tightened. She whispered under her breath, repeating the call sign as if affirming her identity not only to them but to herself. Eagle One. And in that moment, the invisible weight of years, secrets, missions, and sacrifice pressed down on her. She knew the next steps would not be simple. The cockpit, the passengers, the pilots above, all were poised on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one hesitation, and the delicate balance between recognition and chaos could shatter. The words lingered in the cockpit like a threat etched in fire. Someone had assumed her identity. Her hands tightened on the armrests, fingernails digging faintly into leather, though she barely registered the slight pain. Her mind raced back years, decades, to missions buried deep in classified files, missions she had erased from memory on purpose. Her life had been quiet, almost invisible, since leaving the Air Force. She had survived, but the world had moved on, or so she thought. She glanced around the cabin. Passengers were oblivious, adjusting headphones, scrolling phones, sipping lukewarm coffee, completely unaware of the stakes hanging over them like a guillotine. She had to keep it that way. Panic or even subtle fear from them could trigger chaos, and she knew precisely what the consequences might be. The safety of these strangers rested squarely on her shoulders, yet the pilots above had no idea they were also counting on her decades of experience. She recalled the mission that had defined her last years in service. Eagle One had been her call sign, her code name, her identity in the skis. It had meant everything: respect, skill, leadership, survival. But that final mission, the one the Pentagon erased, ended with a catastrophic failure. A mechanical malfunction sent her aircraft spiraling into hostile terrain. She had ejected, barely survived extraction by special forces, and returned to civilian life, officially lost in action for all practical purposes. No one alive believed she had made it back. Her name had been memorialized, her image buried in files, her service records completed posthumously. She had disappeared deliberately, vanishing into anonymity, shedding the weight of recognition and the ghosts of colleagues who hadn't survived. Every day since had been a careful exercise in invisibility. A small apartment, a mundane job, no social media, no connections. She had thought she could finally live free from the expectations, the threats, the watchful eyes. But now, at 35,000 feet, flying over the Pacific Northwest, in a commercial aircraft with ordinary civilians surrounding her, she understood that freedom had been an illusion. The two F-22s above weren't here for a routine check. They were here for her. They had recognized her. And worse, someone else had assumed her identity in her absence. Her heart sank at that revelation. Impersonation within military ranks wasn't a casual crime. It meant espionage, betrayal, possibly treason. Someone had access to top-level intelligence, someone bold enough to step into her shoes, someone who had her mission credentials, her operational authority, her reputation. She clenched her jaw, eyes narrowing. That someone had been operating freely for years, acting in her stead, making decisions in her name. And now, by coincidence or fate, she was airborne in the exact flight path that intersected with both her past and the truth. Captain Reynolds, noticing her gaze, asked cautiously, "Ma'am, are you saying someone's impersonating you? On a military level?" She exhaled slowly, meeting his eyes briefly. "Yes," she said quietly, voice low but steady. "And if they're high enough in command, everything we've done, everything we've achieved could be compromised." Jackson, her co-pilot, paled. "Compromised? You mean the people above, on the intercept team, or—" He swallowed, unsure if he wanted the answer. "Both," she said, tone clipped. She turned toward the cockpit window, her gaze catching the Raptor formation outside. The pilots above had already recognized her call sign, Eagle One. But the question remained, would they know about the impersonator? Or had they assumed the mission report they received in her absence was accurate? Every second mattered. Every choice could tip the balance. The flight attendant standing near the cockpit whispered, "Ma'am, if you're military, shouldn't you, what should we do?" She shook her head. "Sit tight, calm, don't draw attention. The less anyone notices, the safer they are." Her eyes swept over the cabin, lingering briefly on a young girl gripping her mother's hand. She thought of her own past, her own child she had never allowed to grow up in the chaos of her missions. She knew instinctively, protecting the innocent came first, even above her own survival. The cockpit crackled again. Eagle 1, confirm mission readiness. Secondary aircraft on visual escort. Prepare for immediate coordination. Her stomach tightened. Coordination meant she would have to communicate with the pilots above, reveal knowledge that had been sealed away for years. But there was no choice. The integrity of the mission and the safety of the plane depended on it. She nodded slowly, understood, preparing to transmit. As she connected to the secure channel, memories flooded back. Night sorties over deserts, the roar of engines, the heat of explosions, the panic and calm, the split-second decisions that had saved lives or lost them. She remembered the final mission, how everything had gone wrong, the crash, the extraction, the silence that followed, the knowledge that the world thought she was gone. And now it was as if all that history had followed her here into the sky, into this exact cabin. The woman's hands hovered over the microphone, steady despite the adrenaline racing through her veins. "This is Eagle 1, she said into the comm. The voice that emerged was calm, precise, authoritative, the voice she had used in countless missions to command trust, respect, and attention. Static answered. Then a familiar tone, urgent, professional, layered with disbelief and emotion. "Eagle 1 confirmed. We thought you were dead." Her chest tightened. Every muscle memory, every instinct screamed at her that this recognition carried consequences beyond comprehension. These pilots had believed she had perished, and yet she had survived. But if they had believed the mission ended in death, who had filed reports, executed orders, and acted in her name, the thought gnawed at her. She had left her identity behind to disappear, but someone had stepped into it. She exhaled slowly, collecting herself. "Alive," she said simply. "I am alive, and someone has assumed my identity." The cockpit went silent. The flight attendants glanced at each other, unsure what to do, but she didn't need them to understand. Outside, the F-22s adjusted formation slightly, the pilots now aware that the mission had a complication. The real Eagle 1 was present. Recognition, tension, and anticipation radiated through every maneuver. Captain Reynolds asked, voice trembling slightly, "Ma'am, if someone's impersonating you, are they dangerous?" Her eyes flicked toward the window, tracking the jets above. "Extremely," she said, tone flat. "And if they've climbed high enough in command, this flight could be the smallest problem they've created so far." The weight of her words settled over the cockpit like a storm. Outside, the F-22s held formation, lethal and patient, waiting for confirmation. Inside, the passengers remained blissfully unaware of the danger hovering above them, unaware that the woman among them had once been invisible, had survived impossible odds, and now faced a threat far more insidious than she had ever encountered. She leaned back slightly, preparing herself. Years of secrecy, silence, and survival had led to this moment. And as the commercial jet continued through the clouds, carrying ordinary civilians into extraordinary circumstances, she realized one truth. The impersonator wasn't just a threat to her legacy. They were a threat to everyone she cared about. The first step was clear. She had to survive this flight. She had to regain control. And she had to uncover the identity of the person who had dared to steal Eagle 1. But in the sky above, two F-22s adjusted their trajectory. Precision-trained pilots, loyal to her and unaware of the impersonator, waited for confirmation. They had recognized her. They had seen the truth in her call sign. And now everything was about to escalate. The realization hit her like a cold gust at 35,000 feet. Someone had taken her identity, and now their moves threatened far more than just her legacy. She leaned back in her seat, eyes scanning the cabin, as if searching for invisible threats amid ordinary passengers. The murmurs of travelers and the soft hum of engines formed a surreal backdrop to the storm of her thoughts. Every fiber of her being, honed through years of life-or-death missions, screamed at her that the danger was immediate and personal. Outside, the two F-22s maintained formation, precise, relentless, their pilots waiting for confirmation from the only person who could provide it, the real Eagle One. The lead jet tilted slightly, catching a glint of sunlight on its fuselage, a signal almost imperceptible, yet recognizable to her trained eye. Recognition, respect, anticipation. She exhaled, steadying herself. Her mind raced, calculating contingencies, probabilities, and risks. The impersonator wasn't merely a rogue operative. They had likely infiltrated high command, manipulated intelligence channels, and assumed authority in operations designed to influence national security. Her training screamed that this was no accident. The timing, the interception, the recognition, all pointed to a deliberate chain of events. Captain Reynolds, oblivious to the full gravity, asked again, voice taut, "Ma'am, what does this mean for the passengers? Are we in danger?" She turned slowly, meeting his eyes, her voice calm yet commanding. "They're not here to harm the plane. Not yet. But the impersonator has access to far-reaching resources, and their intent is unpredictable. Every move we make is being calculated. The safety of these people depends on keeping calm, staying invisible, and not alerting anyone to our knowledge." The cockpit crackled again, static-laden but controlled. "Eagle 1, report. Secondary aircraft on visual escort. Situation requires immediate evaluation. Status of impersonator unknown." Her stomach tightened. Unknown. That was all it took. Unknown meant she had to act fast, track their movements, anticipate the impersonator's strategy, and prevent any escalation that could endanger the plane. She traced the F-22s through the window, noting the subtle adjustments in formation. They were skilled pilots executing a precise escort maneuver, yet their body language betrayed tension. They knew she was alive, but they didn't know the impersonator's reach. Her hands rested lightly on the armrest, flexing subconsciously. Years of aerial combat had taught her one unshakable principle: identify the threat, assess capabilities, and act decisively. The impersonator had assumed her call sign. They had access to military-grade communication channels. If they were coordinating from a high-level command position, she had to neutralize their influence before they could exploit it. She muttered under her breath, recalling her last active mission. "They'll underestimate me, because they always do." Captain Reynolds, sensing her tension, leaned in cautiously. "Ma'am, what's your plan?" She tilted her head slightly, scanning the horizon and the jets above. "We maintain altitude. Keep a steady course. I need to communicate directly with the pilots above, visual and encrypted. They will follow my lead. And then we uncover who's pretending to be me. Whoever they are, they've made a critical mistake. They underestimated Eagle One." Her voice carried the weight of authority born from decades of experience. Reynolds nodded, turning to Jackson. "Keep her safe," he muttered, though he still barely understood the stakes. The flight attendant moved closer, whispering, "Ma'am, if anyone finds out, if the passengers—" She cut her off with a calm gesture. "They can't know, not yet. Every second of panic could tip the scales. Focus on the mundane. Coffee, reassurance, smiles. That's all that matters for them right now." Her attention returned to the F-22s. They were no longer intercepting. They were scanning, anticipating, watching her. Recognition had shifted to readiness. They would follow her instructions without question, but the impersonator's shadow loomed, and she had to move carefully. She tapped into the encrypted channel, connecting with the lead Raptor pilot. "This is Eagle One. Confirm visual and protocol alignment. Prepare for encrypted transmission." A brief pause, then, "Confirmed, Eagle One, we have visual, formation aligned, waiting your guidance." She exhaled slowly. Every moment was critical. She had to reestablish operational control in a civilian environment, something she had never trained for. "We're initiating a defensive oversight," she said, voice measured. "Altitude stability first. Passengers remain unaware. Then we trace the impersonator's last known communications and operational signatures. We intercept at their source." Outside, the Raptors adjusted slightly, tilting in near-perfect synchronization with the civilian aircraft. Their precision was breathtaking, almost beautiful, yet every movement screamed danger. She had trained pilots to respond this way, but never had she relied on them from within a commercial cabin. Her mind flashed through scenarios. The impersonator could have anticipated her return, set traps, falsified orders, or worse, manipulated command chains to escalate conflict. Every decision had to be deliberate, calculated, flawless. She couldn't afford hesitation. Captain Reynolds leaned closer. "Ma'am, the passengers, if they see the jets, they'll panic. Should I tell them?" She shook her head. "No, calm, mundane, invisible. Let them think it's routine military training or a coincidence. Panic makes mistakes. Calm prevents casualties. That's our first priority." She returned to the microphone. "Lead Raptor, maintain visual. Secondary, mirror formation. We proceed to trace the impersonator. All movements must be subtle. The enemy is sophisticated but sloppy. They'll leave a trace." Minutes stretched, elongated by tension. Outside, clouds shimmered, sunlight caught the wings of the Raptors, and the civilian plane glided smoothly, masking the storm above. Inside, passengers sipped coffee, shifted in seats, and remained blissfully unaware. But she was fully awake, every sense sharpened to instinct. The impersonator could strike at any moment, exploiting the civilian aircraft's vulnerability. She glanced down at her carry-on, at the faded patch she had once sewn herself, the eagle clutching lightning bolts, a symbol of authority, of skill, of identity that someone had stolen. Her fingers brushed it, drawing strength. She wasn't just surviving this flight. She was reclaiming herself. The cockpit crackled again. "Eagle 1, reconnaissance indicates anomaly in command chain. Possible impersonator activity. Action required." Her pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she had feared and expected. She straightened, shoulders back, eyes locking on the horizon. "Then we act," she whispered. "We find them, we neutralize the threat. And we do it without anyone noticing, not civilians, not rogue operators, not anyone." And outside, the F-22s adjusted again, precision perfect, shadows tracking her, ready to execute her commands. The sky was tense, alive with anticipation. Every second was a countdown. Every movement mattered. She exhaled, bracing herself. Eagle 1 had been found. But now she faced the impersonator, the phantom who had dared to step into her shoes, wield her authority, and manipulate deadly forces in her name. The battle wasn't in the clouds. It was about to erupt in every command, every communication, every hidden corner of the skis. The subtle vibration of the plane was barely perceptible to the passengers, but to her it was a signal, a tremor in the invisible web of control surrounding the aircraft. Someone was moving, calculating, testing, waiting. The blip on the encrypted feed had grown slightly stronger, sharper, a digital echo of her own call sign, but different, altered, deliberate. Someone had recreated her signature. Someone had stepped fully into her identity. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with focus. Years of training, of tactical exercises, of surviving impossible scenarios had honed her instincts to razor sharpness. She knew that every action, every adjustment, every communication could be the difference between life and death, for herself, the passengers, and the integrity of a mission that had been stolen from her. Captain Reynolds, still pale, glanced nervously at the readings. "Ma'am, I don't understand. That signal, it's identical to yours. How is that possible?" Her jaw tightened. "Because someone is pretending to be me," she said, voice low but steady. "Someone is using my call sign, my operational authority, my identity, and they're probably listening to every word we say." Jackson, her co-pilot, swallowed hard. So, anyone could be. Anyone, she confirmed. Her gaze flicked to the cabin briefly. Every passenger, every crew member was oblivious to the invisible threat hanging over them. She had to protect them. That was her priority. The impersonator's reach was dangerous, but exposure of civilian lives would be catastrophic. Outside, the lead Raptor shifted slightly, signaling recognition. The pilots above had acknowledged her presence, but they didn't know who the imposter was or how high they had infiltrated. Every move they made now had to be calculated. She activated the secure channel, the one only she could access. Lead Raptor, she spoke softly, deliberately, prepare for trace protocol. Secondary aircraft mirror formation. We're initiating identification maneuver. Visual only, no aggressive engagement unless confirmed hostile. A brief pause, then the voice came, understood Eagle One, visual aligned, standing by. She exhaled slowly, turning to the cockpit. We need to find them. Whoever is pretending to be me is somewhere in command. They're watching, waiting. We can't act blindly. Captain Reynolds leaned in, voice hushed. Ma'am, how do you even start to? Her eyes narrowed. We start by tracing anomalies. Every unusual communication, every deviation from standard protocol, every misalignment in command authority. They'll leave a pattern. They always do. As she tapped into the encrypted feed, another blip appeared, smaller, faster, a digital ghost threading through the system. Her pulse quickened. This was no longer theoretical. This was real. The impersonator had made their move and they were already monitoring her flight. Her mind raced through possibilities. Who could have had the training, the access, the audacity to recreate Eagle One? It had to be someone with top-level clearance. Someone who had observed her missions, her style, her decisions. Someone who knew her history intimately. The cockpit crackled again. Eagle One, anomaly detected in chain of command. Probable impersonator identified. High-level interference suspected. Her throat tightened. Confirmed, she whispered. They're embedded. They've been operating in the shadows probably for months, maybe years. Jackson swallowed audibly. Ma'am, if they're that high up, what does that mean for us? It means, she said, her voice steady despite the tension, that every move we make has to be perfect. Any error, any panic, any misstep, and they'll exploit it. They've waited for this moment, and they know I'm here. That's why the F-22s are following. My pilots need to protect me until we can isolate the threat. Her eyes returned to the window, tracking the lead Raptor's movements. The pilot above adjusted slightly, almost imperceptibly, signaling readiness. She recognized the motion instantly. It was the same pilot she had flown with on countless missions, someone she had trusted with her life, someone who had believed she was dead. Now he was alive, he was alert, and he was waiting for her instruction. She whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Eagle One always finishes the mission. Then came the realization. The impersonator wasn't just a digital or administrative threat. They had real-world reach. Orders, operations, movements, all potentially corrupted by this person. Her own reputation, her legacy, and the lives she had once been responsible for were at risk. And if they realized she was alive, if they recognized her pattern, they could strike immediately. She had to act fast. Every calculation in her mind, every scenario she had trained for, every mission she had survived, everything pointed to one truth: the impersonator had made a fatal error. They underestimated her. They assumed she was invisible, inactive, powerless. But she was none of those things. She was alive. She was ready. And they had just revealed their presence. The cockpit crackled again. Eagle One, unidentified activity confirmed in command chain. Action required. High-level assets moving. Her pulse quickened. Then we move, she said, voice firm. We isolate the threat, secure communications, and regain operational control. The passengers remain unaware. Civilian lives first. Captain Reynolds' hands trembled slightly on the controls. Ma'am, this is incredible. I am Eagle One, she interrupted softly, almost to herself. And it's time to prove it. Outside, the lead Raptor tilted slightly, signaling readiness. The secondary mirrored perfectly. Their pilots had recognized her skill, her authority, and their role was clear. Execute her commands flawlessly, protect the plane, and wait for her lead. Inside, she pulled out a small, secured tablet, scanning encrypted channels. Patterns emerged, commands rerouted, unauthorized accesses, subtle deviations from protocol. It was enough. She could pinpoint the impersonator's location within the system, track the flow of orders, and begin neutralization. Her fingers danced across the screen, executing countermeasures, tracing signals, and identifying anomalies. Every move was deliberate, every decision precise. Years of training, of survival, of leadership converged in this moment. And then she saw it, a digital signature unmistakably linked to the impersonator. High clearance, real-time manipulation of command channels, audaciously bold. Someone had truly stepped into her identity, and now she had found them. Her pulse slowed, her mind sharpened. The game had changed. The threat had revealed itself. And Eagle One was ready. The cabin of Flight 614 was deceptively serene. Passengers sipped coffee, adjusted seats, murmured about connecting flights, and gazed out at the vast expanse of clouds below. None of them suspected the lethal ballet unfolding just outside, in the sky above, or the storm of secrets that had erupted quietly inside their plane. The woman in 14A, Eagle One, sat with the calm poise of a seasoned operative, though inside, every neuron buzzed with calculated urgency. This was it, the moment to reclaim her identity, confront the impersonator, and neutralize a threat that reached higher than she had ever anticipated. Her eyes flicked to the lead Raptor. The pilot, her old comrade from years past, had recognized her instantly. They had survived countless operations together where one mistake meant death, where trust had been absolute. Today, that trust was crucial. His subtle signals through formation shifts told her he was ready, watching her every move, waiting for her command. The secondary Raptor mirrored perfectly, covering the flank. She could feel the invisible net tightening around the impersonator, an elite duo ready to execute her orders, but dependent on her knowledge and precision. Her fingers tapped lightly on the secure tablet, tracing encrypted signals that pulsed like blood through a digital artery. The impersonator's presence was unmistakable, high-level clearance, access to sensitive operations, and audacious enough to manipulate Eagle One's identity. But mistakes had been made. Patterns betrayed impatience, overconfidence, and deviation from standard protocol. She had found the gap. She had the leverage. Captain Reynolds leaned in cautiously. "Ma'am, we have the signal. What now?" She met his eyes briefly, voice calm but commanding. "We isolate them. Step 1, regain control of communications. Step 2, neutralize access. Step 3, prepare for interception if necessary. But step 1 is critical. Everyone must remain unaware." Her hands moved with deliberate precision across the tablet, executing countermeasures, redirecting encrypted channels, and tracing the digital footprint of the impersonator. The signal blinked faster now, almost alive, as if aware it was being hunted. Then the encrypted feed lit up with an incoming transmission. A voice, familiar and chilling, spoke with cold precision. "Eagle One, so you survived. I wondered if you'd still remember." Her chest tightened. She recognized that voice immediately, someone she had trusted on the front lines, someone who had shared victories, defeats, and secrets that no one else could ever know. Betrayal cut sharper than any missile strike. "I never thought you'd live to see this day," the impersonator continued. "Or that I'd finally step into your shadow. It's been exhilarating." Her eyes narrowed. "You've compromised everything. Orders, missions, people's lives, and you thought I wouldn't find out. You miscalculated." A subtle shift outside told her the F-22s had adjusted formation. The pilots were anticipating her next move, ready to act on her command. Every instinct screamed that this confrontation, digital and psychological, had real-world consequences. "You've underestimated me before, and it nearly cost me everything," she said, voice steady. "I'm Eagle One, and you're about to see why they call me that." The impersonator's laughter was cold, hollow, reverberating through the encrypted feed. "Do you really think you can stop me from here? You're sitting on a commercial plane, surrounded by civilians, while I control the operations you once led. You're powerless." Her fingers danced over the tablet, isolating their access, rerouting communications, and initiating countermeasures. "Powerless? That's where you're wrong. I've survived impossible odds. I've been declared dead. I've been erased from existence. And yet here I am, alive, and watching you." Outside, the F-22s moved with lethal grace, perfectly aligned, signaling readiness. The lead pilot executed subtle maneuvers, providing visual confirmation. Interception, not aggression. They trusted her command implicitly, as they had for missions that had once risked everything. The impersonator's voice faltered slightly, just perceptibly. They were confident, but overconfidence had a cost. She traced their digital signature further, isolating anomalies, shutting down rogue access, neutralizing permissions, and systematically reclaiming every channel they had manipulated. "Your moves are sloppy," she whispered under her breath, eyes locked on the tablet. "And you've made mistakes I can exploit." Captain Reynolds, tense, glanced at her. "Ma'am, it's working. They're losing access. What's next?" She met his gaze. "Next, we ensure they can't recover it. Then we confront them decisively." The voice on the feed returned, more controlled now, but tinged with frustration. "You think this is over? You can't undo what I've done. The chain of command, the operations, the intelligence, it's all mine now." Her lips curved into a faint, cold smile. "Not anymore." In a final, orchestrated move, she transmitted a verification code only she could produce. The signal blinked, pulsed, and then vanished from the network. Rogue commands ceased. Access revoked. Permissions nullified. The impersonator had been effectively neutralized digitally, though they still existed physically somewhere beyond her sight. She exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the cabin. Passengers remained oblivious, blissfully unaware of the invisible war that had raged around them. A child laughed softly in the back. A young woman adjusted her headphones. A businessman sipped coffee. Life continued, and she had preserved it. Outside, the F-22s maintained formation briefly, then executed a final maneuver. A salute in flight, subtle but unmistakable to her trained eye. Recognition, respect, closure. Her fingers relaxed on the tablet. The threat had been neutralized for now. The impersonator's reach had been severed, their operations contained, their identity revealed and tracked. The sky above, though still tense with potential danger, was momentarily under control. Captain Reynolds exhaled, voice trembling with relief. "Ma'am, I don't know how to thank you. You saved all of us." She shook her head, allowing herself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. "No thanks necessary. Just keep them calm. That's the most important part." For a moment, she allowed herself to think of the life she had left behind, of missions, comrades, and sacrifices. Eagle One had returned, not just alive but fully in control. The skis were hers once more, and the shadow of the impersonator, though dangerous, had been cut off. She glanced out the window one last time at the two F-22s retreating, their mission complete. The pilots had recognized her. They had trusted her. And she had proven that even after years of obscurity, invisibility, and betrayal, Eagle One was still formidable, still unbroken, still alive. The plane descended smoothly toward its destination, the hum of engines blending with the normalcy of a civilian flight. She leaned back in her seat, heart finally slowing, eyes closing briefly. The passengers remained unaware. The storm of betrayal, espionage, and near catastrophe had passed, and for the first time in decades, she allowed herself a breath of relief. Yet deep in her mind, one thought remained, unspoken but undeniable. The impersonator had not been fully defeated. They were out there, watching, waiting, learning, and one day they might return. But for now, Eagle One had survived, reclaimed her identity, and reminded the world and herself that some legacies are impossible to erase.